They lied to you, not with blatant lies, but with the sweetest words, the kind that sound like love. You are such a considerate person. Humility is the mark of greatness. Don't talk too much about yourself. Let others recognize you. Each phrase dripped into your mind like honey, teaching you that to be loved, you must shrink. That your strength is only worthy when it hides behind modesty. And as the years passed, you didn't realize you had been trained to become smaller, softer, less intimidating. You learned to bow your head in rooms where you were meant to stand tall. Do you remember the first time someone praised you for being humble? That wasn't praise. It was your first lesson in self-erasure. They told you not to talk too much about your victories, not to be too confident in your mind, not to show too much strength. But no one told you that in a world that only listens to those who dare to speak, silence doesn't earn respect. It makes you disappear. A child raised with such lessons grows into an adult who asks for permission to exist. When you achieve something, you are the first to say, "I was just lucky." When someone compliments you, you smile awkwardly and reply, "I'm not that good." When you stand in a group, your voice softens, your gestures slow, afraid of being called arrogant. You don't realize that every time you do that, you are apologizing for your own light. They say humility makes you noble, but in the eyes of those in power, it is only a disguise. Humility makes you pleasant, compliant, forgettable. It makes you safe in a world that only remembers those who dare to step forward. You don't need arrogance. You don't need to shout to prove yourself. But if you keep your head down for too long, soon no one will remember you ever stood at all. Look at the faces carved into history. They never spoke softly. They never waited for their turn. They entered the room and the air changed. They never apologized for winning. They never said, "I just did my duty." They called the storm by its name and made the world bow to their power. And the humble ones, the diligent, the skilled, are remembered through faded photos and forgotten praises, lost in the next wave of time. There is a cruel truth. The crowd loves humility, but they only respect power. They want you to be humble so they won't feel small beside you. They call you considerate, only to make sure you won't rise above them. The world praises softness, but it only bows before certainty. In the game of power, the humble are the ones who step off the board yet believe they're still playing. You once thought that if you did good work, people would notice. That if you were humble, they would see your true worth. But the world does not run on fairness or morality. It runs on perception. And perception is a game of image. No one sees the diamond buried underground. No one hears the song if the musician is afraid to disturb the neighbors. You can be great beyond measure, but if you don't dare to show it, in their eyes, you don't exist. Some say, "But I don't want to brag." No one is asking you to brag, but you can stand tall. You can speak clearly. You can let your light shine without asking for permission. When you deny that light, you send a message. "I am not worthy," and the world will believe you. Because people don't see with their eyes, they see through how you see yourself. If you act small, they will treat you as small. If you hold your head high, they will take a step back to listen. Don't confuse humility with arrogance. The difference is not in the volume, but in the intention. Arrogance demands others to bow. Confidence means you don't bow, no matter who's watching. A person who knows their worth doesn't need to shout. They only need to be present. But if they go so quiet that they can't even hear their own breath, that is no longer humility, it is self-erasure. Society today has turned humility into a false virtue. It praises silent victories, those who need no glory, those who stay behind the scenes. It sounds noble, but in truth, it is how the weak protect the old order from being broken. When you don't speak about your worth, others will define it for you, and always to their advantage. The world does not reward silence. It rewards presence. A man may have intellect, talent, and strength, but if he apologizes every time he speaks, if he lowers his voice every time he's praised, he will be seen as lesser. He will become the supporter of someone less capable, but more outspoken, more assertive, more demanding. And when the lights shine, he will be the one standing in the shadows. No one took his light away. He extinguished it himself. Perhaps this is the most common tragedy of our time. Talented people are taught to shrink in order to be loved. But love that depends on you diminishing yourself is not love. It is the comfort others feel when you surrender your essence. Every time you say, "It's okay, I don't need credit, as long as everyone's happy," You are not being noble. You are cutting off a piece of your soul. Think back to those moments when you did that. When you finished a project and let others take the credit. When you stayed silent in a meeting, even though your ideas saved the team. When you were invited to speak about your achievement, but smiled, shook your head, and said, "I just did my job." You thought you were being virtuous, but in truth, you were slowly removing yourself from the game. They told you that humility is the path to respect. But as Machiavelli once warned, the humble are not loved, not feared, they are forgotten. And forgetfulness is the cruelest punishment. It doesn't hurt at once, but it eats away slowly until you become only a shadow of the potential you once had. So, ask yourself, how many times have you stayed silent to be accepted? How many times have you made yourself smaller so others could feel comfortable? How many times have you won and still apologized? And if the answer is too many, then maybe the thing that needs to change is not how the world sees you, but how you see yourself. You may think humility keeps you safe. It doesn't. It only makes you invisible. And in a world where perception is power, invisibility is the slowest kind of death. There is a moment in life that most of us experience, though few dare to admit it. It is the moment you see someone else, maybe not smarter, not more hardworking, but they walk into a room differently. They don't ask for permission, don't bow their head, don't shrink. And suddenly, every pair of eyes turns toward them. The room tilts slightly under the gravity of their presence. You stand there, silent, knowing that if you spoke, you could do better. Yet somehow, your throat tightens. A part of you has grown used to stepping aside, taught that humility is the right thing to do. And just like that, the moment passes. That is the power of a habit disguised as a virtue. It seeps into the way you sit, the way you speak, the way you apologize, even when you're not wrong. Humility stops being a choice and becomes a reflex. You work harder, understand deeper, but others are the ones seen. You think, it's okay, they'll notice someday. But they never do, because the world doesn't read minds. It only sees what you dare to show. You can see it in daily conversations too. Someone speaks loudly, confidently, and everyone nods, while you who actually understand the issue better choose silence, afraid of being seen as imposing. You limit yourself, believing humility earns respect. But respect does not come from making yourself small. It comes from standing as you are, even if that makes others uncomfortable. Remember, humility is not a virtue, it is a tool. And in the hands of the strong, it is a disguise. But in the hands of the weak, it is a chain. Those who know their true worth can be humble without losing themselves. But those who fear their own value use humility to hide. They hide from the eyes of others, and eventually, from themselves. History has never honored the humble. It remembers those who stood in the storm and said, "I am here." Caesar did not speak softly when he entered Rome. Alexander did not apologize for conquering the world before 20. Napoleon did not bow to his enemies. None of them were called humble, yet all of them are remembered, because they understood that power does not come from fitting in, but from daring to take up space. The modern world has found new ways to glorify smallness. It calls it grace, modesty, maturity. Successful people are told to stay calm, don't boast, share the spotlight. But do you see the irony? When others speak of their achievements, we call it confidence. When we do the same, it's arrogance. The difference is not in the action, but in our habit of undervaluing ourselves. Have you ever apologized for being better than someone else? Saying, "I was just lucky," sounds humble, but in truth, it's how you apologize for winning. A truly confident person doesn't credit victory to luck. He knows he worked for it, and saying so doesn't make him smaller. But you were taught that success is only acceptable when it's wrapped in modesty. And so, you learned to water down your strength, to make it easier for others to swallow. The world praises you for it. They say, "You're so humble. I love how you're not arrogant." But they never step aside for you. They like you when you are beneath them. They respect you only as long as you don't make them look up. That's the nature of the game. People love your kindness until they realize you can surpass them. Then that good virtue they once admired becomes their excuse to keep you below. Humility, when overused, becomes a subtle form of self-destruction. It makes you feel safe, but in truth, you are quietly stepping out of the current of power. You stop talking about your achievements, Stop claiming your place. Stop stepping forward when the moment arrives. Slowly, you become invisible. People remember you when they need help, but never when it's time to reward. You are not hated, but you are never feared. And in this world, if people are not afraid to lose you, they will never try to keep you. The truth is, humility never earns respect. It only makes others comfortable. And the world will always choose its comfort over fairness to you. That is why the overly kind are often overlooked. The skilled but quiet are forgotten. And those who stand tall are the ones heard. You can see this in every setting at work, among friends, even in family. The easygoing ones are always asked to do more and recognized less, while those who speak clearly and draw boundaries, though sometimes called difficult, are respected more, not because they are better, but because they make people remember them. So don't fear making someone uncomfortable. That discomfort is a sign that you are taking your rightful space. People cannot feel both comfortable and respectful toward you. They only respect what forces them to adjust. And adjustment is what happens when someone realizes there is a force greater than themselves in the room. You don't need to shout to be seen, but you must be present. You don't need to declare your strength, but you must walk as if the ground recognizes your steps. Humility makes you shrink. Presence makes you expand. A confident person is never afraid to say, "I can do that," because he doesn't need permission to be great. Imagine a negotiation table. Everyone is talking, arguing, analyzing. One person sits quietly, listening, not out of fear, but calculation. When he finally speaks, every voice stops. He doesn't smile, doesn't soften his words. He simply says, "This is what I want. This is my value." And in that moment, the room understands who leads. That is not arrogance. That is certainty. In life, you need that moment too. The moment you stop asking and start declaring. The moment you stop waiting for recognition and start recognizing yourself. The moment you stop fearing that others might think you are too confident, because that too much only exists in the eyes of those not confident enough to stand beside you. If you still believe humility leads to respect, look around. This world does not remember the silent worker. It remembers the one who says, "I did it." It doesn't crown the one who waits to be named, but the one who steps onto the stage before anyone else can speak. Humility may make you loved, but it will never make you remembered. And perhaps, in a lifetime, that is the greatest loss, not to be hated, but to be forgotten. Silence is not always weakness. Sometimes it is the strategy of someone who understands their own strength. But silence, born out of fear, is different. It is a slow fading under your own light. You stop saying, "I don't need to prove anything," with the voice of confidence, and start saying it like an excuse, as if every act of self-assertion were a sin. And slowly, you lose the line between humility and self-erasure. You no longer know if your silence is a choice, or simply because you've forgotten how to speak. In this world, humility is painted in soft words, but sometimes it is just domestication. They teach you to speak more gently, to smile more kindly, to apologize more quickly, so that you fit neatly into the mold of someone pleasant. You become the person everyone likes, but no one fears losing. You think that is the triumph of character, but in truth, it is how they keep you low while making you feel noble. There is a confusion that has lasted too long. People think arrogance and confidence are the same. They forget that there are those who do not need to shout to be heard, do not need to boast to be seen, yet they never bow their heads. They walk into a room and the air changes, simply because they do not ask permission to exist. That is the energy you once had, before you were taught to soften yourself to be accepted. Try to remember how many times you lowered your voice to make others comfortable. How many times you pretended to agree just to keep the peace. How many times you forced a smile when someone took credit for your work, thinking, "It's no big deal." The truth is, each of those moments was a small grave dug for your own power. Humility became the tool others used to control you, making you believe that shrinking was a sign of maturity. But true maturity is not silence. It is knowing when to speak and daring to do so without trembling. They tell you, "Let your work speak for itself," but your work has no voice. Only you can speak for it. And if you don't, someone else will in a way that serves them. They will tell the story where you are the supporting character and they are the hero. And once that story is told long enough, it becomes truth. Not because you weren't great, but because you didn't speak enough for people to know you were there. Perhaps you believe that silence was a mark of strength, that truly powerful people don't need attention. But look around. In every room of power, those who speak the loudest are not always the best, yet they are always seen as leaders. Because this world does not honor humility, it honors presence. There is a fine line between confidence and humility. That line is the breath you take when you enter a room, the humble inhale and shrink, the confident inhale and expand, filling the space with their calm certainty. They do not need noise, but everyone knows they are there. Their presence is a statement, not a request. Pause for a moment. If you are hearing these words, perhaps something is stirring inside you. Maybe a small anger at having been silent for too long. Maybe regret for the times you stepped aside and were forgotten. If you feel that, don't push it away. Let it stay, because that is not arrogance awakening. It is the voice of the part of you that was taught to stay buried. And if these words reach you, I want you to stop for a second, take a deep breath, and leave a trace of yourself. Not for me, but for you. A line, a response, a whisper that says you understand, that you are still here, that you will no longer stay silent. Because sometimes, a single word can be the beginning of your return. The world will always tell you, be humble. But remember, that advice is not always for your good. Often it means, don't make me look up. They want you smaller so they don't have to adjust. And if you keep bowing your head, they will grow used to looking down on you. When that becomes habit, you will forget how tall you once were. Imagine this. Tomorrow, you walk into the same room, the same you, the same voice, but this time, you no longer apologize for existing. You speak less, but clearer. You don't smile when you don't want to. You don't nod when you want to disagree. You don't need to shout, only to look straight ahead. In that moment, people will feel something shift. They won't know what it is, only that they can no longer ignore you. That is the true power of presence. It doesn't need noise or self-praise. It only needs you to stop hiding. Humility teaches you to shrink to be accepted. Confidence teaches you that you don't need acceptance to exist. And maybe now is the time to choose. Do you want to be loved for being easy, or respected for being real? The world doesn't remember the gentlest souls. It remembers those who stepped forward, while others were still asking for permission. Humility may earn you praise, but only certainty earns you attention. And if you want to be heard, you must stop whispering. Let the world adjust its volume to you, not the other way around. Because if you don't speak, you will fade. If you don't show up, someone else will take your place. And if you keep calling your shrinking a virtue, soon, you won't even recognize yourself in the mirror. Don't let that happen again. Imagine a foggy morning on a gray field where two armies are preparing for battle. At one end, the first general stands tall, eyes sharp as a blade. He does not shout, he does not smile, he does not try to make anyone comfortable. When he speaks, his voice is firm as steel. We will win. His soldiers look at him and believe instantly, needing no proof. At the other end, the second general is also brave, also skilled, but his voice is softer. He talks about teamwork, about opportunity, about humility in victory. His soldiers listen, nod, and then turn away, feeling nothing in their hearts. When the battle begins, only one side charges, without hesitation. The other waits for signals, for agreement, for permission, and only one side survives. This is not a story about war, but about mindset. A person who dares to claim their right to exist will always have more power than the one who asks to be heard. In every room, every relationship, every negotiation, the pattern repeats. The world does not bend toward the polite, it bends toward the certain. People do not follow kindness, they follow certainty. Because in moments of uncertainty, humans are drawn to strength, and strength comes only from a soul that does not apologize for its own power. We are taught to lower ourselves to keep the peace, to share credit so that others will like us. But what you call peace is often the silence of someone being overpowered. And sharing credit is sometimes just how you surrender your own authority. People never remember who began the work, only who stood at the end and said, I did this. Think back to the times you stayed silent in meetings, when the idea in your head was clearer than anything being said aloud. You sat there, waiting for the right moment, waiting for others to finish. But that moment never came. Someone else, less capable but more certain, claimed the space, and all eyes turned to them. You smiled and told yourself, "It's fine. What matters is the result." But deep down, you knew once again you had stepped away from the place that was meant to be yours. Humility teaches you to wait, but history was never written by those who waited. It was written by those who seized the moment, even when they were not invited. They didn't have to be perfect. They only had to show up. And once they claimed their space, the world revolved around them. That is how power is born, not through permission, but through assertion. The irony is, you still believe that if you are good enough, people will naturally see it. But people are not wired to recognize what is best. They only notice what is most visible. And visibility always belongs to those who are not afraid to be seen. In a world that runs on perception, choosing humility often means choosing to fade. There is a saying, "The lion is not admired for his gentleness. A lion is not respected because he is kind, but because he knows when to roar." How long has it been since you roared? Have you forgotten the sound of your own voice? Do you realize that the very gentleness they praise is what's making you lose your instinct? When you bow your head for too long, your neck forgets how to look straight. When you give up your place too often, your legs forget how to stand firm. And by then, even you forget that you ever had fangs. They call the advice of humility moral, but it is really political. It keeps those with potential from crossing the line of safety. It turns the strong into the gentle, and the gentle into the obedient. A perfect system does not need to suppress you. It only needs to teach you to suppress yourself. And you think you are being noble, when in truth, you are being made harmless. Do not misunderstand, there are times to bow, but only to observe, not to stay down. A wolf lowers its body not out of fear, but to measure the distance to its target's throat. That is the difference between strategy and submission. You were born to choose when to advance and when to retreat, but never to forget why you were on the battlefield. Humility makes you believe you are protecting relationships, but any relationship that requires you to shrink for the other person's comfort will eventually erase you. Because if they can only love you in your reduced version, that love is not for you. It is for the weakness they need to preserve in themselves. So stop seeking peace through smallness. True harmony does not come from agreeing with everything, but from making others aware of your weight in the conversation. When your presence is strong enough, people will adjust. When you are faint, they will treat you like air. And no one fears losing what they cannot feel. Some say, "I don't want to seem arrogant." But you don't have to be arrogant. You just have to stop apologizing for existing. Arrogance says, "Only I am right." Confidence says, "I know I am right." The arrogant need others to believe them. The confident only need to believe themselves. That is the difference between emptiness and true power. If you still doubt, remember this moment, the one where you stood before a crowd, heart pounding, words trapped in your throat, not because you had nothing to say, but because you feared being misunderstood. You feared they would think you were showing off or trying too hard. But the only thing you should fear is that moment itself when silence steals your chance. Because nothing is more tragic than losing yourself just to be called nice. True strength is not in loudness, but in certainty. The strong do not speak often, but when they do, everything stops. Humility makes you believe you must shrink to be loved, but power teaches you that only when you stand at your full height will the world truly see you. And if there is one thing you must carry with you after all this, it is this: never ask for permission to exist. No one can grant you a place more rightful than your own. When you walk into the room, walk as if your name is already on the wall, not because you want others to fear you, but because you want to remind yourself you were never born to fade. There is something subtle about power that few are willing to face. People don't need to take your strength away. They only need to make you believe that using it is wrong. The moment you start feeling guilty for being too visible, too certain, too different, the game is over. They win without a fight. Because from the second you begin to censor yourself, you become the loyal guardian of your own limits. And so, humility, what seems like a virtue, becomes the most sophisticated lock society has ever built. They teach you to be considerate. Don't make others uncomfortable. Don't act like you're better than anyone. But behind those gentle lessons lies a deeper message. Don't make them look up to see you. Humility is praised precisely because it serves the order of the crowd. It keeps everything peaceful by making the most capable people silence themselves. A peaceful world built on the quietness of those who should have spoken. It's ironic, isn't it? You are praised as kind when you stay silent, mature when you give in, humble when you don't take credit. But in truth, all those compliments are just ways of thanking you for not making others feel small. They say you are sweet, pleasant, but they will never say you are intimidating. And that is exactly what strips away what every powerful soul needs: a presence that commands respect. Do you see it now? In every relationship, the one most loved is not always the one most respected. People might love your softness, but they won't follow your lead unless they feel the quiet pressure of your certainty. Humility removes that pressure. It makes you safe, likable, approachable, and easy to forget. Once, in an interview, a man was asked about his success. He smiled and said, "I was just lucky." The crowd applauded, but somewhere in that audience, another man, talented, yet not as successful, sighed in relief. He felt less pressure because the successful one had made himself smaller. That's how society works. We celebrate humility not because it's beautiful, but because it makes us more comfortable with our own limitations. But every time you dim your light to make others comfortable, the world loses a bit of its brilliance. And slowly, you, the one who once shone the brightest, forget how radiant you used to be. You start speaking less, stepping back more, telling yourself that's what maturity means. But maturity is not about shrinking. It is about mastering your own light, not extinguishing it. Humility, when misunderstood, is no longer a virtue. It becomes a defense mechanism in disguise. It makes you feel noble for not claiming rewards, when in truth you're just afraid of stepping into your rightful place. It teaches you to call hesitation humility, avoidance kindness, and self-denial faith. And in doing so, you become the perfect protector of the system that keeps you quiet. Do you notice the pattern? Everywhere at work, online, in public life, people celebrate silent victories. Those who achieve great things are told, "Don't be too proud." The talented are advised to be humble so others can learn from you. Yet strangely, the louder, often less capable ones are the ones handed the microphone, the applause, the recognition. Humility doesn't help you rise. It helps others breathe easier when they can't keep up. The older you get, the clearer it becomes. Society doesn't reward excellence. It rewards visibility. No one cares how much you achieve if they can't see it. And you can't even blame them. That's human nature. Perception is built from image, not intention. People don't remember how good you are, only how clearly they saw you. And humility, that lesson about not showing off, is the perfect art of erasing your own trace. Perhaps the most painful thing is not being underestimated, but being forgotten. You are not opposed, not criticized. You are simply passed over. People still smile, still thank you, but they don't stop for you. No one feels the need to listen because they assume you don't need to be heard. Humility makes you good enough to be there, but never important enough to stand at the center. And slowly, you vanish from your own life, while those who did less are remembered as pioneers. Humility is worse than that. It makes you forget your instinct to lead. Every time you say, "It's okay, I don't need to be first," you are teaching yourself that you are not allowed to lead. Every time you let others speak for you, you are teaching them that your voice doesn't matter. And one day, when you finally try to speak, your own voice will sound so distant that you'll wonder, when did I become this small? You see, the world is not afraid of the talented. It's afraid of the talented who know they are. And to keep you in the safe zone, it teaches you that arrogance is sin and humility is salvation. But don't be fooled. There is nothing moral about self-denial. A person who refuses to acknowledge their own worth is not humble. They are trained to fear their own light. And so you live your life as the pleasant one. Everyone likes you. Everyone says you're good. But when the opportunity comes, no one calls your name. When decisions are made, you are forgotten. You sit there, smiling politely, telling yourself everything is fine. But is it really, when deep down you know you were meant to be the one they listen to first? They tell you, stay grounded, don't stand out too much, don't make others feel small. But they don't understand that once the lion stops roaring, the whole forest falls asleep. And when the forest sleeps, who will remember the beast that once woke it? No one. Because no one remembers what has gone quiet. And if there is one thing you must remember right now, it is this. You were not born to make others comfortable. You were born to make them change. If they feel uneasy, it means you are doing something right. If they call you arrogant, it's because for the first time, they have to look up. And if they tell you to be humble, smile because they have just admitted that you've grown beyond what they can control. There was a room you once entered the room where everything was decided. You remember the light on the table, the focused faces, the faint tapping of a pen against the wood. You were there, with every sharp idea, every answer already in your mind. But you didn't speak. You waited, out of politeness. You thought, they'll ask me soon. They didn't. The meeting ended. The door closed. And someone else louder, bolder, took what was meant for you, not because they were better, but because they spoke first. In that moment, you didn't lose your chance. You abandoned it. No one took your power. You placed it down quietly. Humility may make you feel moral, but power doesn't care about morality. It leans toward the one who raises their hand. The world doesn't decide by fairness. It decides by presence. And presence is not given, it must be declared. In every room of power, people read one another with their eyes. Who bows, who meets the gaze, who hesitates, who breathes evenly. 1 second too slow, and they've already seen you. You're not judged by your ability, but by how confidently you show it. You can be extraordinary, but if you don't let the world see it, they will assume you are ordinary. In this game, silence is not understood as humility, it is mistaken for weakness. Humility makes you believe you are keeping the peace. But really, you are digging space for someone else to step in. You don't name your own worth, so they name it for you at a much lower price. You don't say, I deserve this, so they believe you don't. And when that happens long enough, it stops being how the world treats you. It becomes how you treat yourself. Now imagine another room, a throne room, the ancient hall of power. Between 2 rows of stone pillars, cold air flows as light falls straight on the throne. Before the king kneels a man. He has served loyally for years. He is intelligent, honest, humble. He never asks, never claims credit, always smiling as he says, I only did my duty. The king nods slightly, then looks away. The door opens, and another man enters, younger, bolder, unproven, but his eyes do not waver. He speaks clearly, directly, meeting the king's gaze, and with that, the air in the room shifts. The king looks up, and for the first time, he sees. The humble man, after years of service, never made the king lift his head. He did nothing wrong, he simply failed to be remembered. The newcomer, though he had achieved nothing yet, changed the room just by being sure of himself. Because power recognizes confidence long before it recognizes accomplishment. Presence is never granted. It is declared through a steady voice and an unlowered gaze. That is the tragedy of humility. It steals your signal. In a world where people have only seconds to judge each other, the signal is everything. When you speak softly, when you hesitate, when you start your sentence with, I'm not sure, but you have already told them you're not worth listening to. So no matter how deep your insight, they stop hearing it. People listen to energy, not logic. They respond to certainty, not accuracy. You can call it unfair, but it's the law of perception. People do not respect what they cannot feel. You can be right, but if you are not present, your truth carries no weight. Humility takes the power out of your words. It teaches you to speak less to be liked, but the world does not reward the quiet. It rewards those who make others stop to listen. Notice this, the truly influential, even the quiet ones, have a silent gravity. When they enter a room, everything pauses for half a second, not because they are humble, but because they know exactly who they are. The humble, on the other hand, often aren't sure. They avoid eye contact. They speak with a tone of permission. They smile more than they need to. And just like that, they make themselves invisible. You cannot make others respect you if you don't respect yourself. And self-respect doesn't sound like, I'm humble. It sounds like, I know my worth. No one remembers those who never speak their own value. The world doesn't measure kindness, it measures clarity. If you don't name your price, people will assume you have none. Humility used to be a symbol of character, but today it has become a tool that lets others undervalue you while you keep smiling. You think you're loved for being simple, but really, you're loved because you don't threaten anyone. And that kind of love is nothing more than polite pity wrapped in admiration. You must relearn how to appear, not by shouting, but by stopping the endless apologies for your existence. If you're good, say it. If you want something, ask for it. If you've earned it, let it be known. No one will think less of you for it except those afraid of seeing you at your true size. But that fear is proof you're finally being seen. Humility teaches you to lower your gaze to survive. But have you ever seen a true leader survive by bowing forever? Never. Because one who keeps his head down too long forgets the weight of the crown. And when he forgets, someone else will pick it up. So if you're hearing this, ask yourself, when was the last time you made a room pause? When was the last time someone looked at you and knew they couldn't ignore you? If you can't remember, maybe you've been humble for too long. And in the game of presence, silence is never neutral. It always means you've been replaced. Stand tall. You don't need arrogance, and you don't need apology. You just need to let the world see that you are here clearly, fully, and without fear. Because once you begin to truly show up, those who are used to looking down will have no choice but to lift their heads. One day, you will wake up and realize you are exhausted from being the pleasant one. Tired of hollow thank yous, of always saying, "It's okay," of watching others step onto the stage where you should have stood. One day, you'll look back at your path and ask, why am I always the one who does the work, but never the one who is seen? The answer isn't in your ability. It lies in a false belief that humility would protect you from judgment. The truth is, humility doesn't protect you. It hides you, and the world cannot reward what it cannot see. Every time you shrink yourself to keep the peace, every time you hold back your words for fear of being misunderstood, every time you downplay your victory to stay polite, you give away a piece of your power. Those small pieces add up until, one day, even you forget your own shape. People will tell you that humility is noble. They will tell you to always be considerate. But ask yourself, do they truly want what's best for you? Or do they simply want you not to move too fast, not to make them look up, not to remind them of their own smallness? They don't want you to rise. They only want you to stay just enough. And just enough is where potential goes to die. Humility teaches you to share your light. But if you keep sharing until you have nothing left to shine with, who will still see you? You were not born to be the background light in someone else's story. You were born to shine in your own. When you dim yourself, you betray not only your talent, but also those who need your courage to light their way. Someone once said, "The world does not remember those who waited. The world remembers those who stepped forward while others were still asking for permission." Every pioneer was once called arrogant before being called visionary. Because every revolution, even the quiet one inside your own soul, begins the moment you dare to say, "I have worth." And nothing threatens a society built on submission more than the voice of someone who once stayed silent, finally speaking up. Think back to all the times you said, "It's okay." When someone took credit for your work, when you were praised and replied, "I was just lucky." When you knew you were right, but stayed quiet to keep the peace. Remember every one of those moments and ask yourself, were you being kind? Or were you afraid of being seen? Fear disguised as virtue is still fear, and you cannot build a life on retreat. This is not a call to arrogance. It is a call to accuracy. The difference between arrogance and sovereignty lies in the eyes. The arrogant demands submission. The sovereign only needs self-recognition. He doesn't say, "I am better than you." He says, "I belong here." He doesn't need to argue, because the certainty in his voice is already the conclusion. Walk into the next room as if there is nothing left to prove, because truly, there never was. You only need to stop asking permission to shine. Don't make yourself more pleasant. Don't lower your voice so others can stay comfortable. Don't apologize for your sharpness. The world doesn't need more gentle souls who fade into the background. It needs people who know what they bring and dare to let it be seen. Look at those you once admired. They never bowed their heads to be loved. They never apologized for being talented or for having ambition. They never pretended to be ordinary to make others feel safe. And if there's one thing that sets them apart, it's that they accepted being disliked as the price of being remembered. The humble are loved. The present are respected. And between comfort and respect, only one becomes legacy. You don't need to shout. You don't need to step on anyone. You don't need to prove your greatness. You just need to tell yourself, for the first time in years, in a steady, grounded voice, I will not shrink anymore. Say it not for others to hear, but for you to believe. Because the moment you say it, the world around you shifts. You'll realize people don't judge you for arrogance. They judge you by how much you make them pay attention. And attention is the beginning of respect. From today onward, learn again how to walk as if the ground is waiting for your step. Speak with steady breath, without trembling. When someone interrupts, don't fall silent, pause. Look them in the eye and continue. When someone says, don't take it so seriously, smile and reply, I take what matters seriously. When someone tells you, be more humble, look at them calmly and ask, why? Because a king only loses his crown when he forgets its weight. When he forgets, someone else will pick it up, not someone better, just someone louder. And if you keep waiting, keep bowing, keep lightening yourself to fit inside others' comfort, you'll watch that crown pass you by and never return. So don't just listen. Rise. Because no one grants you presence, you must reclaim it. No permission, no praise, only a clear decision that from this day forward, you will never again apologize for your own light. Thank you for staying with me until the very end of this story. If this message touched your heart, please give it a like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell so you'll never miss the next journey we take together. Your support means the world to me.